When people meet via computers or personal ads or phone-in radio shows, when their first sight of each other is through a communications medium, isn't it still possible that some essential chemistry is communicated? That's the hope explored in this film, an unapologetically romantic movie about two people who fall in love from opposite sides of the continent through the medium of a radio program. By the end of this film, we're hoping the lovers will meet atop the Empire State Building, a steal from Affair to Remember. And the movie is doing everything to keep that from happening. The actors are well suited to this material. Tom Hanks keeps a certain detached edge to his character, which keeps him from simply being a fall guy. Meg Ryan, who is one of the most likable actresses around, is able to convince us of the magical quality of her sudden love for a radio voice. And that was Roger Ebert in one of his reviews from 1993 of Sleepless in Seattle. Hello and welcome to Total 90s Recall. I'm Molly.
And I'm Chloe.
And between my time on set and Chloe's narrative insight as an editor, we are watching for the first time 90s movies and asking ourselves, were these really as good or bad as we remember or their reputation implies? And today, as you might have figured out, we are talking about 1993's Sleepless in Seattle. Chloe, was this your first time watching?
It was my first time watching.
Nice.
Yeah, I had never seen it before. And honestly, I think the thing that surprised me, well, two things surprised me. One is the tone. I thought it was much more of a kind of longing romantic film rather than mostly a comedy. And second of all, I wrote down, when do they actually meet?
What to get into.
And they actually meet at the very end.
Yes. So this was the second time I've seen it. And funny story about the first time I saw it probably in about 1996 on a VHS at my grandmother's house in the middle of the day. I'll never forget because my mom and her are going in and out of the living room. It comes to the scene where Meg Ryan and Bill Pullman, Annie and Walter, are just sitting on the bed, getting ready for bed. And, Walter is allergic to everything and has his humidifier, and they're passing like tissues back and forth, and they're getting ready for bed. It actually couldn't be nothing could be more unsexy than this scene, right?
That's
they're not
the point
having
of
sex.
the scene.
That is the point.
That's literally
of the
the point of the scene,
right?
isn't it?
So that's where my grandmother comes in and she leaves and doesn't say anything. And then the end of the film comes and, it's like the climax of the film and Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan are finally meeting. And she goes, "Oh, did she divorce the other guy?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, don't worry. They never got married." And she's like, "But they were sharing a bedroom." And my mom comes in. She's like, Mama. No, she said, "Mama, they didn't show them having sex. It's not a big deal." And she's like, "But they were sharing a room and they weren't married." And she's like, "Mama, just leave it." And I knew, I was like, oh my God, this is so that is literally the memory I have of Sleepless in Seattle.
Wow. Your grandparents were very old-fashioned then.
I would say my grandparents and my parents.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that. That's another podcast. But that was my memory. I also remembered liking it. And I remember, I'm like, was it cheesy? We'll get into what I thought about it on the second watch, but I haven't watched it since the late 90s, mid 90s. So let's get back in our time machine, though. This was released on the 25th of June, 1993 in the U.S. and the 24th of September in the U.K. It had a $21 million budget, and it made $229 million. So it was very much a sleeper hit.
A sleepless hit.
A
some might
sleepless
say.
hit. Well done, Chloe. It was number 2 at the box office, behind previous episode Jurassic Park, which was still roaring through the theaters at number 1 on its third week. This got 2 Oscar nominations, screenplay, and I wrote son. I don't know what that means. I think I meant
Song.
Song.
Best original song.
That
A
was
Wink
it.
and a Smile, performed by Harry Connick Jr.
Thank
As
you.
I was watching it, I thought, oh, is that Harry Connick Jr.?
Of course, it's not a Nora Ephron film without Harry Connick Jr. Same 2 BAFTAs, 3 Golden Globes, Picture, Actor, and Actress, 4 MTV Movie Awards, including Best Duo, which I think we could call into question if they even should have been nominated.
Maybe they meant Meg Ryan and Rosie O'Donnell. They're the best
That's
duo
what
in
I
it.
thought.
Mm.
That's what I thought. No.
Oh.
Or I thought maybe Tom Hanks and
Rob Reiner.
Joan. No, Rob Reiner, yes. Literally, how many amazing duos are there? There's Rob Reiner and Tom Hanks. There's Rosie O'Donnell, Meg Ryan, and then there's Tom Hanks and Ross Malinger, who played Jonah. Literally, those 3 are better duos, which is no slag off to Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks, but
they're just not sharing screen time.
they're just not sharing screen time.
Yeah.
Directed by Nora Ephron, screenplay by Nora Ephron, David S. Ward, and Jeff Arch, who originated the story. I always had in my head this was like Nora all the way through and through her original screenplay. It was not.
No, Jeff Arch came up with the story and was kind of, I think, shopping it around, and there were several rewrites, and it had a really torturous years-long history before it ever came to Nora.
Yeah. Starring, of course, Meg Ryan, Tom Hanks. This is the same year he would win his Oscar for Philadelphia. Rob Reiner, Bill Pullman, Rosie O'Donnell, Ross Malinger as Jonah, and a young Gabby Hoffman. And I wanted to call out David Hyde Pierce, who we know from Frasier, who apparently can't star in something that doesn't have Seattle at the center.
Yes, and I noticed that he is basically playing Niles in this.
Yes.
Essentially, isn't he?
And Frasier comes out. I wonder if he got casted off this role because Frasier comes out September of this same year.
Yeah, there's a bit of an overlap, isn't there?
Yeah.
Also, Tom Hanks' real wife, Rita Wilson, plays his sister.
Hollywood.
So, interesting, yes.
Chloe, what's the log line for this?
It is, a recently widowed man's son calls a radio talk show in an attempt to find his father a partner. So, no mention of Meg Ryan and her character in that. It's basically just sort of the inciting incident, and that's it. It's almost like whoever wrote that logline for IMDb just sort of died halfway through.
Yes. Or fell asleep halfway through the
My
movie.
work here is done.
Yeah.
I said something about the story. I can go.
Yes. Yeah. Nothing about Meg Ryan. Nothing about nothing.
Yeah. Is there a character limit for these log lines? I don't know. I guess I just wonder why they are so perfunctory and so lacking in, spirit.
Heart, brains, anything.
But yes, I think it doesn't quite get the sense that, yes, there is this dual narrative. We've got the perspective from Tom Hanks's character Sam and his son, and we start with their backstory. Wife's died and he moves across to Seattle, and how they're getting on with their lives, and everything with the talk show host and the fallout from that. And then there's Meg Ryan's character Annie and her meh relationship and her finding out about Sam. So that's more of the story.
Yeah, it's like a recently widowed man's son calls a radio talk show in an attempt to find his father partner while a woman drives across country to meet her meh fiance's family.
They're probably all really, really allergic to lots of things.
Can you imagine what that dinner will be like? At least her family was like lively. I can't imagine. And also what would be served at that dinner? Oh my God.
Nothing would be served.
Bread and salt.
They'd be allergic to the salt.
Yes, exactly. I was supposed to say not even salt. But why are we doing this film for Total 90s? It is Women's History Month. I don't know if the whole month is...
Yeah, Women's History Month, March. Observe it.
Okay.
You're a bad woman if you don't know that.
I know.
You're an international woman, so you celebrate International Women's Day, but then you don't observe the history of the women for the rest of the month.
I am an international woman, but a bad woman.
So you have to hand in your woman card.
Yes.
Yes, to the woman police.
Here it is, ladies.
Yes.
I see. I need my education. So that's why we're watching this. And also it's a bit of a nostalgia feel.
Yeah. But it's written and directed by a woman, Nora Ephron. And I was reading an interview with her, and she was asked about directing Is it hard being a woman director? This is what she was asked when interviewed about the film in 1993.
Yeah.
And she says, very pithily, the hardest thing about being a woman director is becoming one.
Yes.
Which is a pretty neat way of saying it. And I think, that idea of it's hard to get taken seriously enough to be handed the reins, even though obviously she had written a massive hit in the form of When Harry Met Sally by this point.
Yes. So let's get to the reputation of Sleepless in Seattle. It was a huge film in 93. It's known as one of the most beloved rom-coms, obviously behind When Harry Met Sally. Do you think it deserved that reputation, like to be one of the top rom-coms of especially the 90s?
I think I admired it more than I enjoyed it, if I'm completely honest.
You admired it?
I admired the chutzpah
Uh-huh.
of having your two leads not meet until the end. I thought that's an
Yeah.
interesting idea, but I didn't enjoy that. I kind of wanted them to just meet and to get together and to have a rom-com made in the 90s, set in the 90s, where your two main characters don't even kiss. They just soppily hold hands at the end, which makes
Yeah.
sense because they've only just
Yeah.
met each other. There's no interpersonal development between them. We
Yeah.
get lashings of characterization from their scenes with their friends
Yeah.
and family and so on, but we don't get anything about them. There's no relationship.
That is not true, Chloe. We know that Tom Hanks slash Sam's wife that died could peel an apple without breaking the peel, and so can Meg Ryan.
Well,
So, like, we are learning more about
we
their
are
relationship.
learning about how they might be compatible, definitely, but we're
Yes.
not seeing them together, basically.
Yes.
And I guess also, I didn't really feel the grief because we didn't know the wife. We see one
Mm.
scene of her there's a kind of more fantastical scene where she appears to him as presumably a hallucination. I wasn't struck by the grief, I didn't really feel it. And compare with, say, the opening 5 minutes of Up, where where we go through an entire
That is another level.
romance and marriage and the grief, and we feel it within a few minutes, and we're like,
Chloe, the man literally leaves the city of Chicago and moves across the country.
I get it intellectually. I understand he's sad. I just didn't feel it.
Yeah, fair.
I didn't know the wife to care about her. I mean, she's just immediately fridged. And I wasn't yearning for the two to get together, I guess, because I didn't see them together.
Mm.
This is not a romantic comedy that worked for me on the romance level, but it worked for me on the comedy level. So I
Yeah.
laughed. And so I had a good time on that side. It's a good Nora Ephron film and it's a good comedy. To me, it's not a great romance. So I don't really get the romance reputation.
Yeah, fair enough.
I'm feisty today, clearly.
I love feisty Chloe. I love feisty Chloe. So I actually liked this more than I was expecting to because
Uh-huh.
I do remember it being quite, I was like, oh my God, it's very cheesy. And I was surprised you were like, let's do Sleepless in Seattle. And I
Yeah,
was like,
because
oh, okay.
I guess because everyone is going for rom-coms at the moment. Everyone wants
Yeah.
romance. They want an alternative to the franchises and the action and all of that. And things like Bridgerton and Heated Rivalry are all massive at the moment. And on the shelves, people are buying romance like it's going out of fashion, but it's just getting more fashionable. So
Yeah.
it's a big thing. And yet actually everyone is always talking about how there's not enough romance and rom-coms being put out by Hollywood.
Yeah. Maybe it's because there's no romance in their actual lives. And that's why they want romance.
Yeah. So therefore, it feels like we want to revisit one of the big ones from the
Yeah.
90s because that was the heyday of the last heyday,
Yeah.
you might say, of rom-coms.
Totally.
So that's why I suggested it, but it
Yeah.
wasn't what I expected exactly.
Yes. What were you expecting?
I was expecting it to be more romantic,
Yeah.
literally.
And see, so yeah, I think I really enjoyed this film. Again, I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did, but I think what I liked about it, to your point, wasn't so much like the romance, it was the writing, it
Yeah.
was the performances. That's what I loved about this film. Like when I'm taking my notes, I'm just constantly writing like
Yes.
lines that were said,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's what I loved about the film. And like I do hear your point about the wife, she's shelved. But I think that's part of the point because we're trying to see how these two are gonna make it together.
Yeah.
Like before I watched, I was like, am I gonna root for Meg Ryan? Because I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, she was kind of a stalker. But this time I enjoyed it more than I was expecting, again, because of the script and the lines. I think what made it so enjoyable for me was the performance and the casting. You know, you have Meg Ryan, you have Tom Hanks, you have Rob Reiner, which we did A Few Good Men, a few episodes again, and he directed. But he started out as an actor. He's only in 3 scenes, but every scene he's in, he's just pitch perfect. He's bringing the comedy, and I just was like, "Oh, damn it. I miss Rob Reiner, the actor, because
Uh,
he was in Wall Street." You know, he made a few, scenes of New Girl. I mean, we could go on, but he was just, like, pitch perfect.
uh.
I wonder if they casted other people, if it was other than Tom Hanks or Meg Ryan. I don't know if it would have worked because at that time in the 90s, Tom Hanks is eternal. Meg Ryan at that time, they're both just at the height of their careers and people love them. So
Uh.
you want to see Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks get together. I don't know if we care so much about Annie and Sam getting together.
Yeah, I think obviously they were big stars, weren't they?
Yeah.
Apparently, Meg Ryan wanted her husband Dennis Quaid to be
Yes.
in it,
No.
and I think Jeff Arch, who wrote the first version of the script, had pictured Kevin Costner, who was also a massive
Yes.
star, and I suppose he is kind of a massive star now, more on TV now. I think they cast Tom Hanks because he was more this immature, boyish character, even though by that
Mhm.
time he's sort of in his mid-30s, and he was sort of interested in playing a part where he was a bit more mature. He's playing an architect,
Yes.
and I think he worked with Nora Ephron to make his part a little bit more, give him a rougher edges, make him a bit
Yeah.
more blokey, I guess, because he didn't want him to be too sentimental.
Yeah.
And that's what seems to be attracting all the women in the film. They're all obsessed with him. So like, oh, he's so sad. His wife is
Yes.
dead. And and that's the attraction. He has got a little bit of snappiness to him. Like the dialogue
Yeah.
with his son, he is pushing back and he's quite kind of like, where'd you get this idea from? When they're
Yes.
talking about sex and the boy's like, you're gonna have if you get married again, you're gonna have sex, and is she gonna like scratch your back up? And he's like, what? Where's this
Well,
come from? And
yes.
she's like,
Yeah.
well, my friend's got cable TV, so he's pushing back and having
Yeah.
this less sentimental side to him, which I think
Yes.
is adds a little bit of spice to it.
Well, and when he's in the airport and he's like, he's talking, Vicky has left. It's the last time we see Vicky, actually. She's left the film. She's left Seattle, she's left the film. He's like, listen, I'm trying to get to know Vicky. Why does she do this? Why does she do that? And I don't think another actor, just the way he delivers the lines, I just don't see like a Dennis Quaid doing that.
Mm,
I think Dennis Quaid would come off as
yeah.
a dick.
He can kind of do a modern version of a screwball comedian,
Yes.
so kind of almost Spencer Tracy, but moved on to the 90s.
Yes. And apparently he and Victor Gerber, I hope I'm saying that right, the guy who plays the brother-in-law,
Mm.
plays Rita Wilson's husband, they improvised that scene about the Dirty
Oh,
Dozen. Because
yes.
apparently Nora Ephron, she was very much like, do this lines just as you see them, but she did encourage some improvising
Mm.
after that. But apparently they improvised that scene, which you can kind of
Works
tell.
really well, actually, because
Yeah.
you've got this moment where Rita Wilson's character is being really sappy about an affair to remember. She recounts the plot and is sort of
Yeah.
breaking down into tears, and the men around her are kind of looking at her just like, what the hell? Is she really this upset? Her husband says something like, oh, it's a chicks film, that film. We're not interested. And
Yes.
then they start reminiscing about the Dirty Dozen and then seem to, I think, genuinely be getting upset and really sappy about it.
I didn't see them getting upset. I thought they were kind of they were still making fun of her,
Oh,
but with a guy's film.
I thought that, and then I thought, no, they seem to genuinely be like
Oh, they
obsessed with
do
this
love
film.
the Dirty Dozen, but I think that to your point, I think they're like, "How can you get this sappy about a film?" But one thing I did like was that a reoccurring thing of all the women in the film love An Affair to
Yeah.
Remember. Becky and Annie, they're talking about An Affair to Remember, and then Rita Wilson's crying about it, and then later at the Empire State Building, the security guard is like, "Is my wife's favorite." But it was a nice way to tie, like, Meg Ryan when she was talking about Rita Wilson because she had seen her in the street with Tom Hanks. Oh, she looked like somebody we'd hang out with. So again, it's like the audience should root for them
Mm.
because like Meg Ryan would get along with
With the
Rita
sister,
Wilson, his
yeah.
sister. But yeah, it was so nice seeing Rosie O'Donnell. I was so excited to see her. She styled the character off of Bette Midler, the way she walked and
Yes.
stuff.
Yeah, I
Um,
love her. I love her role in that. I love that she's this kind of cynic. She's got the secret romantic streak. She encourages Annie to go out and, well, to essentially stalk Sam. Um,
yes.
but, I love that Nora Ephron was very keen to give all of these secondary characters memorable, slightly filled out roles. And obviously,
Mhm.
that's important to give us a sense of the main characters because they're not going to have an actual relationship with each other. So you see them having relationships with their friends and family.
Yeah.
But Rosie O'Donnell, her character is just my favourite. I loved all
Yes.
her scenes with Annie. Whereas I think I would say that in many modern rom-coms, I recently watched The People You Meet on Vacation,
Mhm. Yep.
and I found the best friend in that quite perfunctory and
Yes.
not nothing to write home about. Whereas with Rosie O'Donnell, I'm like, yeah, I love her. And she made me think of the character that she plays in Beautiful Girls, kind of the best role in that, where she's very cynical. She's even more cynical, and she has a big rant about how men objectify women. In this, she's just having these little asides about her exes.
Yeah.
But I absolutely love Becky's stony expression when Annie tries and fails to recall the funniest thing that Walter
Yes.
said the other day,
Yes.
and just literally can't. She's just sitting. You can tell she sat through many of these conversations.
Every time Annie talks about Walter, it is a roll the eye. "Oh,
Yeah.
isn't he so funny? Isn't he this?" And just her facial expressions are just, like, on point.
Mm,
If Annie was my friend, I'd be doing the same
yeah.
thing. And, like, poor Bill Pullman does a great he's pitch perfect as Walter, and it's so funny because the year right before this, he's in While You're Sleeping, and very, like, romantic and suave and rough and all this kinda stuff, and
Mm,
completely different role.
yeah. Do you think that maybe Nora Ephron based Becky's character on herself? I feel like she's probably the closest to her. And
Yeah.
Ephron said of herself, there's no one who's more romantic than a cynic. And I think that's what she's done with Becky.
Yeah, and she's a journalist. I mean, I think she's Annie's editor.
Mm,
But yeah, and Efron was a journalist.
mm.
So speaking of Efron, she was the writer. Well, really, she wasn't the only writer, but she really helped kind of give this the structure and the
The
dialogue. And as we
humour.
both said,
Yeah.
the humor, like that was my favorite part.
As I say, I think Jeff Archer's script was more of a romantic drama. And
Yeah.
then what she eventually came to, originally just as a script doctor, she pepped it up and rewrote it to give it much more comedy. So it became quite a different beast. And I think that's its saving grace in many ways, even though
Yes.
obviously I critique it for not being romantic enough. But it punctures what could be a very sentimental premise. I
Yes.
mean, they're talking about destiny and fate and so on. And actually, that comedy really helps ground it. It's just so much more interesting to watch because you've got all these fast paced exchanges. Everyone's a wit. Even the son. I mean, the son is like no 8-year-old you've ever met.
No.
He is a
No.
Hollywood child. It's very kind of classic Nora Ephron, isn't it? But there's lots
Yes.
of pop culture references and it's very silly as well. And one of my favourite moments is a Rob Reiner moment, and it's when Sam and Rob Reiner are kind of riffing on the idea of Sam asking out an interior design colleague. I think that is Victoria.
Yeah.
And he's sort of saying, you have to ask her out in a suave way, by like asking her out to look at swatches. And so then they start talking about like do it in a way that Cary Grant would do it. And Rob Reiner does the most hilarious line where he's like, "Hello, Diane, take a look
Yeah.
at these swatches." And it is just such a funny line. And I almost wondered if that was improvised, but at any rate, they inhabit those characters so well.
Yes.
They inhabit that script so well. And it's that kind of, it's daffy. I guess
Yeah.
that's the way I would say it. There's a silliness to that. And a lot of scripts nowadays are purely exposition or purely
Yes.
there to be like, this man is sad because his wife is dead.
Yeah.
Whereas this is very much, let's just riff on this for a little bit. It's sort of a
Yeah.
bit letting comedians be comic.
My favorite line between the two of them, and see, I think Rob Reiner actually is slightly, for me, edges out Rosie O'Donnell, though I love Rosie O'Donnell as well. But he's like, and you got to know about tiramisu. And Tom Hanks is like, what about tiramisu? Well, he's like, you'll figure it out. And he's like, but what if a woman wants me to do this to her? He's like, you'll figure it out. And I love that whole thing. I love it also in 1993, like these guys don't know what tiramisu is.
Yes.
I guess that hadn't made it to Seattle. Like, are you not going out to eat?
Apparently, tiramisu was unknown, even though it had been around for a couple of decades by that point. And apparently it led to a surge in interest in it. And people called the studio, and there were TV shows talking about how to make it as a result of this film. I genuinely did look at it and go, well, he surely must know what tiramisu is. Therefore, Jay must actually be referring to some bizarre sexual practice. And so then I was like, oh my God, what would tiramisu be? So I started to be taken in as well.
Well, and that's, oh my God, that is a funny thought, what we think tiramisu might be. But in 2026, we're like, we know what tiramisu, so it almost makes it funnier.
Yeah.
Do you think Tom Hanks / Sam would have used the dating apps, or do you think he would have been against them?
I think he'd be against them because
Me too.
he's even against the idea of splitting the check with
Yes.
a date. He thinks he should pay. I think he would probably be very against using it, and good for him is all I can say.
Yeah. I really liked the whole family dinner scene. As you said, it's first of all, it's like total chaos. It's side comments, side conversations. Everybody's funny. Everybody's quippy. There's all these like little gags and little running jokes. And yeah, all the little dialogue and choices, like when she's talking to her mother in the attic and saying, telling how I'm talking about Annie, Meg Ryan, talking about how Annie and Walter met. And she's like, it's so funny. You make a million decisions that mean nothing. And then one day you order takeout and it changes your life. And it goes back to this whole thing of like destiny and stuff like that. My mom's like, destiny. She's like, I don't believe in destiny. And then she tries on the wedding dress, which actually I really like the wedding dress. And then it rips. And she's like, oh no, a sign. And her mom's like, you don't believe in signs. There's so many like little lines in the dialogue and how everything's very economical but still
Yes.
funny. And
Yes.
it adds to the story.
Mm.
Nothing is wasted.
Yeah.
But it's still, except for the romance between the two main characters, it still adds to the story.
Yeah.
And we know so much about these characters
Yeah.
except for them falling in love.
Yes, you're right on the money with that idea of it being economical. I mean, I think from the point of view of the script, in those first 2 minutes, we learn everything we need to know about Tom Hanks as Sam, albeit we don't know anything about his wife. We learn about why she's so wonderful, but as I say, I
Yeah.
didn't really feel it. We open with a shot that shows you Tom Hanks with his son at the graveside, burying the wife. Then it's presumably at the wake. He's sort of staring out the window. His sister's struggling to get him to kind of cope, and she's sort of trying
Yeah.
to tell him how to cook. And then we see he's an architect and he's deciding about making a change with his life and quitting to move to Seattle. And so it's all these brief tableau, short dialogue exchanges. It's just like, right, done that. Now we've set up the story. We don't need to have half an hour telling you about like the wife dying and so on and so forth. So I really like that. I also think the way the actual film is composed, the way in which the framing choices and the
Yes.
blocking within it is really well done by Nora Ephron.
Yeah.
So often the camera's static and the characters are put within the frame in a way that's really smart, demonstrates their relationship. So an example would be Annie and Becky, they're coming into the living room, they're watching An Affair to Remember, and Becky sits in the foreground and she's looking towards the camera, and Annie's doing what she's doing in the background. And Annie's talking about, she's sort of spiraling about whether or not to contact Sam, send him a letter, blah, blah, blah. And then you're just getting these deadpan responses from Becky. She never turns to her.
Yes.
She's just responding. And you could just tell so much about this friendship. She doesn't even she didn't need to turn around and look her in the eyes to respond to her. They know each other that well. And they do the same with Jonah in the foreground when Victoria and Sam are flirting in the background, and this kid is just like staring off to one side, just like getting more and more irritated by her irritating laugh.
Yes.
So it's those sorts of things. And again, you know, you mentioned the choreography with Annie and Walter getting ready for bed. They're back to back. He's going through his various sort of little rituals for, you know, for sorting out his allergies, and she's just handing him things without looking, like a routine clockwork.
They've done this so many times.
They've done it so many times, and that's showing you there's no spontaneity or passion when they get ready for bed. So that it's just so smart the way it's all put together.
Yes.
Like, it doesn't need to have anyone say this stuff. It's just put together in a way that makes you understand completely what the characters are thinking.
Absolutely. My two favorite shots were when Sam and Jonah are sitting on the bench, you know, and they're mirroring each other. There's a lot of mirroring through the script and the tone. And then when they're at the airport, Tom Hanks again is having that conversation with Jonah. You know, Vicky has left the film. She's left Seattle, and it switches back between the two of them. But every time it's on Jonah's coverage, there's a gate, and you see these people coming, you know, into the airport, as happens in airports. No big deal, but it's much wider, which is telling us you need to be paying attention. And then that's where Annie comes in to Seattle, and then that's the first time he sees her, and she doesn't know that it's him, right? But you're just kind of anticipating that.
Yeah. On that point about mirroring, I mean, I think, yes, it's in the script, so we're getting that sense of they almost are having a bit of a dialogue in that first radio phone-in scene when she's driving.
Yes.
She's sort of matching his answers. So the talk show host, psychologist, whatever she is, says, "Oh, I don't want to invade your privacy." And then both Annie and Sam say at the exact same moment, "Oh, sure you do."
Yeah.
Annie's surprised she said it at the same time as him. Destiny is always being emphasized by the editing. As you said, they sit down on a bench overlooking the water at the same time. They're platonic lovers separated by distance.
Yes.
And then there's these recurring things. So, as you say, affair to remember. The terrorist factoid. This would be hilarious if it were true. It's easier to be killed by a terrorist than it is to get married over the age of 40.
Oh, yeah.
That comes up a couple of times in each storyline.
Yes.
And gets put down. As you say, the peeling an apple. I thought that was quite elegant. Like, we see her peeling an apple thoughtfully. I'm not sure if she does it all in one strip, but then much later, Sam is talking about how his wife used to be able to do that, which is obviously a real amazing wifely skill. They're catching a cab from the same taxi rank. So there's always this idea of like destiny. A path is laid out for them. And Nora Ephron even said that they shipped a door from one set, I think from Baltimore, to the Seattle set, just so that they could have a match cut of the two characters going out of the same door. Like, it's literally the same door.
Dedication.
They really are going for that star-crossed lovers thing.
Yeah. Economical in the storytelling through the mirroring. And we just see that these, again, you want them to get together. But again, I don't know if it's because it's Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. But let's get into what aged well, what aged terribly. You want to go first?
So, a small thing. The dodgy CGI in the final shot of the Empire State Building, I think that aged very badly. Just bad. About Walter being neurotic and his allergies. Nowadays, I'd say everyone's got an allergy or an intolerance. And here it's there to signify what a wet blanket he is.
Yes.
So everyone's a Walter now.
There you go. I do like that they made Walter, he's a nice guy.
Yeah,
You
he
know,
takes rejection well.
he takes rejection. Well, this is positive masculinity, people.
Mm.
But yeah, they made him a nice guy. It would have been easy and cliche to make him like an asshole, and
Yeah.
therefore she'd be running from something.
Yes, exactly. But it helps make her dilemma worse because there's nothing wrong with him per se.
No. Anyway, anything else for Wait aged well or terribly?
Well, Annie's behavior is slightly verging on stalking.
Yes.
Once she hires the PI,
Yes.
I mean, yes, she's a journalist, but then she's not actually ever committed to writing a piece on this. Apparently, Jeff Arch based this on a Washington Post article about women who do actually, well, at the time, were hiring PIs. Obviously, nowadays we have the internet to stalk people through. And in fact, there's a writer and digital producer called Demi Lyle Wilson who created a trailer reimagining the film as a stalker thriller. I'm going to put that in the links to the show notes because it is quite literally, in another world, it could be a film that is sort of more like Fatal Attraction, which gets a reference
here's
here.
my question. When they get together, well, I mean, he's already seen her. Like, is he going to be okay with the fact that she just flew across the country? Is she going to say, "Oh, I hired a detective to track you down"?
Yeah, I mean, like, how does she never has to explain why she turned up to kind of just gaze at him from across the road and then get in a car and bugger off.
And he just doesn't, like, does he not care?
Yeah.
Is love just that powerful?
Apparently.
Or does literally the reason this film ends when it does is because about an hour or two later, he's like, "Oh, you're crazy. We can't be together. My child is near you. Let's go."
Yeah.
What aged terribly for me was Rosie O'Donnell's character using the word transvestite.
Okay.
When she was saying you don't know what this guy does, he could be this, he could be that, he could be a transvestite.
She kind of lines up like serial killer, he could be this, he could be that, and then the transvestite. Yeah, it has, but also it's a funny line. So I think
it is a funny line.
I think many actual transvestites would find that funny.
We'll have to ask.
What has aged well is the idea that someone attracting mad hordes of admirers on the basis of one media appearance.
Yes.
Like, that has happened.
Yes.
It just didn't anticipate how mad people's crushes would be. So, for example, in the intervening period of time, we've had people falling in love with Harambe, the gorilla. Luigi Mangione, who is accused of and going on trial for murder.
Yes.
I think that's a kind of idealism-based crush, but people are literally making kind of Catholic-style montages of his face. So definitely that rings true now, that people go crazy for a guy, just a guy who rings in this case, to a radio show.
Do you think it's because, like, the bar has become so low for men that, like, a guy who shows any bit of vulnerability, women just go mad for?
But apparently that was the case in 1993.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that, like,
it's eternal.
Like, any kind of vulnerability. I mean, I did write down, I was like, what is the appeal? But I think it is, this idea that maybe he has loved and lost. Like, a man, the only acceptable man who's been married before is a widower, because through no fault of his own, the relationship ended, but it proves that he could have a functioning relationship.
Yeah.
Is, I think, the thinking, although I don't think it works out that way in real life. But I think that's the fantasy of, like, oh, he's so wounded, I could heal his wounded heart.
Yes.
Is, I think, the fantasy.
When I think also how he talked about her. She's so perfect and all of this.
She was so perfect. I just think I would listen to that and be like, well, I'd never match up.
Exactly. I know.
I can't peel an apple.
I don't know if I could marry a widower, because I'd be like, do I add up? Do I match her?
Yeah.
That kind of leads me to kind of my most 90s lines and scenes and moments. This premise, the whole radio show could only happen in the 90s. Now it'd be like a podcast.
Yes.
And it'd be like shared on social media, and it'd be word of mouth. It'd be in newsletters. So there may be this, as you say, people do get these crushes on these random people, but it would like swell. It wouldn't be like all at the same time. It'd be like a little bit at a time. I thought that was very 90s.
She'd have to get that article out the next day. She can't spend weeks prevaricating over it.
No.
I
No.
saw an interview with Jeff Arch, sort of looking back on the film. He said at that time, in 1990, the internet hadn't really happened yet. There was really no way to find out about somebody else. He said it.
Yes.
This film could not happen set now. It is very much a 90s time capsule, and they're using kind of Lonely Hearts column style names like Sleepless in Seattle. I think Nora Ephron plays one of the phone call-ins,
Yeah.
and it's something like Despairing in Denver or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Down in Denver. Yeah.
I mean, I suppose you still see misconnections columns on free newspapers, but I mean, when did you last pick up a free newspaper? I don't know.
Nope.
But also, I thought it was interesting, this idea of connection across the airwaves and like a media moment where everyone's tuning in. The women at the diner are all being like, shh, listen.
Yeah.
Everyone's listening to the show, and then they're talking about it later. They're having a water cooler moment after the holidays. And we have that a little bit.
Yeah.
We have it sometime, but we kind of live in our own curated media world.
Yes.
To some extent now.
And Netflix is trying, I think they're trying to change that a little bit by, they did it with Stranger Things. They've now done it with Bridgerton, but they'll release like 3 at a time, and then they'll wait, and they'll release 3 at a time. And I think they do that for a number of reasons. So hopefully you can get some more water cooler moments, but also I think it also keeps people with their subscriptions.
Yeah. My 90s details. So the Rolodex.
Yep.
News search and a kind of fax interface.
That was on my list. I had the computer fax. Yeah.
And also Jessica, who's Jonah's friend, who I think is meant to be about sort of 8 or 9 or something. She dismisses Tom Hanks's character when he comes into Jonah's bedroom. She's like, H&G. And he's like, what? She's like, hi and goodbye. And I remember those funny little kind of phrases. Like, again, it's that sort of thing of everything. It's cool to abbreviate things.
I love it's real quick talking about her, and the script just making me laugh again was when, she's being interviewed, like, where is he? Where's Jonah? And she's like, NY. And he's like, what does that mean? And her dad's like, no way. And he's like, that's NW. And and it's just like Tom Hanks' delivery is like, it just wouldn't work without Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
So I also love the AAA detective agency. I feel like that's a 90s detective agency. You wouldn't have that in a film today.
Well, I think also because they're called AAA because then they're at the top of the phone book.
Oh my God. The days, the phone book, you could sit on it. So any awards? Do you have any awards for this
I
film?
have a couple. So maddest 90s outfit. There's kind of 2. You decide. One is David Hyde Pierce's wife, Betsy. She's wearing, at the Christmas gathering, she's wearing a sort of buttoned up high neck shirt with gold and purple ruffles down the front.
Yeah.
It's hideous.
Yeah.
And then we also have Victoria's boxy pink suit with an enormous dangly brooch on the lapel. What the hell was she thinking? It's mad. And she's wearing it as her first date. I couldn't comprehend as a person living in 2026. I was like, that is way too much. That's way too much for any occasion.
Victoria is clearly the winner. I also thought Clarice, is that the name of the babysitter?
Oh, yes. She never says anything. She's just...
Yeah, she never says anything.
Yeah.
Her clothes were very 90s, but also I feel like I saw them in Highbury Fields like 2 weeks ago or like last week. I saw the kids. I'm like, that outfit is coming back, and I see that around. But it was like very
cool.
90s.
Yes.
Very cool.
And then I have most prescient line. Jessica says, if it's in the computer, they believe anything. And I thought, yes, that's true.
Yes.
You have summed up all of the 2020s there, Jessica.
You have no idea. My award is sort of an award that for the job that no longer exists, or like it did in the 90s, and that is the travel agent. Really think about it. Like I think they exist for maybe big companies or like big events, but travel agent was definitely like a good job in the 90s.
I would like a travel agent. I'd like to just say, I fancy, a bit of culture, a bit of sun, good food, and then they're just like telling you, here's how much it costs and sign here, please, rather than having to spend many hours with too much choice. We should
Yeah,
go
that's
back
what
to that.
see, AI, that's why you can use
Mm.
AI.
I'm like an Amish person, but for the 90s, I think. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to go back to like the 1890s. I want to go back to the 1990s when everything was easier. And if you wanted to find a man in Seattle, you had to get on the phone and call up a private investigator.
Yes, and fly across the country and
Yes.
stalk him
Yeah.
like a respectable woman.
Like a respectable woman.
Okay, so Chloe, if somebody likes this film or maybe they're like, "Well, what film would you recommend instead of this
Hmm.
film?" What would you say?
I've got three.
Great.
Okay, so You Hurt My Feelings from 2023.
Oh, yeah.
This is because I
Oh,
think that the writer-director Nicole Holofcener is arguably the modern-day inheritor to Nora Ephron. I think she has that dialogue style,
yeah.
snappy, smart, acerbic, really privileges the actors' performances and allows them to do a certain amount with their characters,
Yeah.
and slightly neurotic.
Yeah.
And this is a film in which Julia Louis-Dreyfus is married to Tobias Menzies. She's a writer and she has written her new book. And Tobias Menzies is out with his friend and he's read her book and he admits to his friend that he doesn't think it's so good. And she overhears this and then goes into a kind of crisis, a tailspin about it because she feels betrayed by her husband for
Yeah.
not loving her work. Again, it's about these people who lead middle class professional lives and their world is very much like that of Sleepless in Seattle, and their problems are not life or death, but they care deeply about it and they're going to
Yeah.
talk about it in a very funny way.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed
When
that film.
when my husband and I saw that, he was like, "Yeah, so because the whole thing is like, are you honest with your partner? Because she's a creative, she's a writer,
Yeah.
and when you have a creative, should you be honest
Yeah.
with?" He's like, "Well, what do you think about that?" And I was like, "What do you think about that?" You know?
All
I
I
was
can
like,
say is she's lucky to have a partner who will read her work. Now, a curveball, Your
Yeah.
Name from 2016. It's an anime romance directed by
Oh,
Makoto Shinkai, and it's very hard to describe. It's a kind of body swap romance, and there's a theme of fate and destiny, which is why I thought of it for as a recommendation for Sleepless in Seattle.
mhm.
The main character is a high school student, and she makes a wish to become a boy. She wishes that she were a boy. She's not going through gender confusion. She's just literally, I think she just wants to live a different life.
Yeah.
And so then she starts body swapping, like swapping with a boy who lives in another place, shall we say. And they just randomly swap every now and then. And the question is, will they ever actually meet? And there's all sorts of things going on. There's a comet that's going to hit the Earth, or meteorite, whatever the difference is. It's quite a big scale story,
Yeah.
but it's also about this relationship and the romance that's kind of driving it. So I
Mhm.
thought of it because they are living each other's lives here and there, but
Yeah.
will they actually ever meet? I thought that was an interesting comparison.
Yeah.
And then lastly, One Fine Day from 1996,
Oh,
which I
yes,
believe
future episode.
is very much a Nora Ephron style 90s movie that's not actually by Nora Ephron. It's Michelle
Yeah.
Pfeiffer, it's George Clooney. Michelle Pfeiffer is the architect, and George Clooney is the newspaper columnist.
See?
So their jobs were reversed, and they have a chance meeting, and they've got childcare issues, and they end up basically spending a very stressful day together and maybe falling in love.
Ooh, cool. Well, I love all of those. And Your Name, I think I'm definitely gonna
It's really
look up
good,
that.
actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
actually, I've seen all of them, but that one. So mine may be one of them may be an obvious recommendation, but if you like Nora Ephron, if you liked this and you like Meg Ryan, you have to see When Harry Met Sally. I will probably recommend that a lot because it's literally my top three favorite film. I love it, but again, because I think it's a more, obviously The difference is they see each other over and over through time, but I think it's a more successful film
Mm.
than this one. And not to slag off Sleepless in Seattle, but there's a reason I watch that film every single year.
Mm.
It's just killer dialogue, killer direction, and really fleshed out characters, but still really funny. And then a more recent, it's so funny. I'm like, I don't really watch rom-coms anymore because certainly watched a lot in the past, but another reason I like doing this podcast is like, was that a good film? I don't know if I can recommend it. But one I saw recently, you already watched. And the reason we recommend it is because, or you already mentioned it earlier, is it wasn't what I was expecting, was People We Meet on Vacation. It's on Netflix right now.
Mm.
I did think the one falling was the friend. I was like, why is she there? There's really no purpose
Mm.
to her. But I maybe because my expectations were so low. And then I watched it and I was like, oh, this is actually kind of fun. Because I think you
Yeah.
watched it and you said you liked it.
I did enjoy it. I just feel that it's a shadow of what it could be.
Fair enough.
It's
Fair
a very
enough.
dramatic way to
I
put it.
think, what's funny is I used to watch a lot of rom-coms and now I just don't anymore.
Because they don't make them really, you
They
know?
don't. And so
Yeah.
that's why I'm like, listen, when I'm looking back at my catalog, I have a lot, but I'm like, I don't know if I can recommend that.
Yeah. Materialists, actually, you could recommend that because in some ways it's going over similar themes to this, because although this
Yeah.
Sleepless in Seattle is very, ultimately it's quite starry-eyed and it talks about magic and fate and so on.
Yeah.
Materialists
Yeah.
won't give away the ending, but there's a much more explicit discussion, like in this film, about idealism versus realism, and the fact that Meg Ryan's character in Sleepless in Seattle is kind of going, no, you have to go for what's practical. She has a conversation with her brother about it. He has a great line. So what we think of as fate is just two neuroses knowing that they are a perfect match. And I think Materialists talks explicitly about this idea of sizing people up and settling, or do you want to hold out
Yeah.
for your ideal, your fantasy? And it's funny that we're still talking about that 30 years on.
Yeah. Well, the other film I had thought about recommending is by materialist director. Her first
Mm.
film, Past Lives, again talking about that deals with
Mm.
fate in a
Yes.
different way. I wouldn't say it's a comedy. There is like comedic moments, but it's definitely not a comedy, but it's a beautiful, beautiful film. Past Lives. I believe it was nominated for an Oscar, but it's about these two kids. They're childhood friends in Korea. She moves away and grows up in Canada. And then they were starting to have little crushes on each other, but they were like 10. Then they connect as young adults later, but then it's all Skype. And then again, nothing ever happened. Then their lives move on, and then they come back together as like grown adults, but she's in a relationship. And then they have this moment of like, oh, can we make this work? Should we make this work? I don't want to let it, I don't want to give it away because I think where it ended is just a really beautiful moment. It's brilliant. I love that one. So that's another one.
Yeah, I think that's great. It basically is looking at a relationship where the two are not together.
Yes. Okay, well that is it for us. We hope you enjoyed this. Are you going to watch Sleepless in Seattle, or have you recently watched it? What did you think of it? Please let us know. You can email us at total90srecall@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram, Total 90s Recall. That's Total 90s Recall. We also put some more content out there. And tell a friend. Tell the next person that you're stalking in Seattle, or maybe when you call into a podcast or a radio show, tell them about Total 90s Recall. The next time you drive across the country to meet a man that you heard randomly one night, tell them about Total 90s Recall and give us a 5-star review wherever you're listening to this. It really helps with our discoverability. I'm Molly.
And I'm Chloe.
And we'll see you at the movies.